All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sarah Falkowski, Education Coordinator at Rookery Bay Research Reserve in Naples, Florida. And I'm happy to welcome you to our Science at the Surface EDscursion live from the field. You're going to be meeting a variety of Rookery Bay staff members today. But first, I want to give you a few housekeeping tips. So since we are in a webinar format, that means that we are not able to see or hear you from the audience. But we know that you're there and we know that you want to participate. So you can use the icons at the bottom of your screen. Where it says chat, you can go ahead and type in there and you can send a message to anyone on the panel here. And our back-end customer service will help you if you have questions about that you're not able to hear us or see us, or you want to make some changes to the view on your screen, or you want to sign up for a future program and you're having trouble with the website. Any kind of customer service help, go ahead and put it in the chat. If you have a question for our speakers today, which we hope that you do, you can go ahead and enter it into the icon just to the left at the bottom of your screen called Q&A. In the Q&A box, not only will you be able to type your question, but you will be able to see questions that other people have typed. And if it's a question you also would like to hear answered, click the thumbs up symbol to the left, and that will be considered an upvote. That means that we will start answering the questions that have the most votes in case we get too many questions to answer at the end. So that's it for me. I'm going to give a little introduction on who we are and where we are, and then you'll meet the rest of the team momentarily. So Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve is part of a national network. There are 29 places around the country, including Alaska, Puerto Rico, throughout the Gulf, the West Coast, and the Great Lakes. And we all focus on research, education, and coastal training and stewardship. Within Florida, we are also part of another group called the Department of Environmental Protection, Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection. And together we help protect 4 million acres throughout Florida. So you can see on this map that our reserve is located in this area here on the western edge of the Everglades. And here's a map of our actual reserve, 110,000 acres. We manage the land within this yellow boundary. So if you're familiar with the area, we've got Naples up here in the upper corner. Our boundary goes around Marco Island, through the 10,000 Islands, and borders Everglades National Park. And today our team is going to join us live from the field in this area of the reserve right here. So I'm going to turn it over to Janine, who's going to introduce herself and tell you about what's to come. All right, Janine.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are so excited to be here streaming from the field again. And like Sarah said, my name is Janine and I'm part of this amazing education team. I am the customer service today, so I will be keeping my eyes on the chat for any difficulties. If you can't hear, maybe something on your screen you need help with, I'll try my best to attend to that. And I'm also going to be facilitating our questions for the end. So please, 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 get those questions going, and we will be sure to answer as many as possible when we're done from the field. But we have another special guest with us, so I'll let Jeff introduce himself.
Hi, how's everybody doing today? I'm Jeff Carter. I am the stewardship coordinator here at the Rookery Bay Reserve, and I oversee the team that does all the, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it, the land management, direct on-the-ground management of the natural resources here in the reserve, which is guided by our science here at the reserve. All right.
Nice.
So
well, we are going to get started. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I'm going to give them a sneak peek.
Gotcha. All right. So here we can see kind of an overhead aerial of the area that we're going to see out in the field here in just a few minutes. And we wanted to show you these maps so we could let you see what it looks like from way up above, from a bird's eye view. And you can see the dots in the on the left-hand screen where it says Sentinel Site Components. You can see those dots, and one says SET, and that stands for Surface Elevation Table. And we're going to learn all about those today. I'm not going to try to explain what it looks like to you now because you're going to see that here momentarily. You can also see the dots there that say vegetation. Those are the vegetation plots, and those are associated with those set tables. And we're going to explain more about that. What those vegetation plots are actually measured out areas where we look at the plants that are growing within those areas, and we identify everything within that area so that we can look at it changing over time. We're going to explain more in a little bit about what we mean by change and why that change occurs. Over to the right-hand side, you can see the aerial that it's going to show you the elevation. We wanted to let you see this is what we call LIDAR, all right? And that LIDAR map shows us our elevation. And you can see that the yellow color is a little bit higher elevation. The blue is lower. So the yellow is closer to the road that you see running through the picture, right? And so that means it's a higher elevation, obviously, because the road, if we're going to put a road somewhere, it's going to be where the elevation is the highest, right? And as it moves over to your right and gets to those warmer, that bluish looking color, that's some wetlands over there. So we're actually moving from a scrub area, which is that yellow at the higher elevation, our Florida scrub, which is a very xeric, kind of dry, sandy, but you can see how those different habitat types are kind of what we call mosaicked in together. So it kind of swirls in together. Mother Nature doesn't put things in nice little blocks and squares. It's all flowing very naturally. But you can see that there's some mosaicked upper elevation habitat types, which is that habitat type that we call scrub, and then it moves into some kind of more, a little bit lower land pine flatwood area, and then we get into those wetland areas. All right, so we wanted you to be able to see clearly what that looks like. So once we get out into the field and we start explaining stuff to you, you'll be able to tell what's going on with what the set table is there for. Now, one of the things that we do when we decide where we're going to put our set tables and where we're going to put the vegetation plots, we actually started out by creating a very detailed habitat map, which we're going to see a little bit later. But the reason that we did those habitat maps first, vegetative habitat type mapping, so we have this really detailed habitat map of the entire reserve, and it shows us in high detail and resolution where all of the vast myriad of different types of habitats are located in the reserve. And all of that, of course, has to do, that's determined by, where those plants are growing has to do with the elevation too as well, right? So it relates very closely to that. And so what we're going to see when we're looking at that is it's going to tell us, one of the reasons we did our maps first was we wanted to know, okay, the reason that we're doing this is to be able to capture changes in habitat types over time as sea level rise is coming up and the water level is rising. Those habitats that can stand saltier water or more water or less salty water, those habitat types slowly over time, those plants will shift. Where they grow will shift and change, all right? And so what we wanted to do when we did that map 10 years ago, actually a little over 10 years ago, was to tell us where can we look at this habitat map that will tell us where we might be more likely to see change earlier on. Now, remember that it's very flat here in Florida, right? And so, it's kind of like, I think Jill was the one, you're going to meet Jill later, but she's the one that said our mountains are only like inches high, right? So because we're so flat, right, and there's not drastic changes in elevation, that means that it doesn't take very much change in water level to make those changes in habitat types as far as moving around. They're going to be more apt to move around with not much change in sea level rise, okay? But remember that it's not just about the water level changing, but the surface of the earth itself, right? The surface of the ground near where we see, and you're going to understand this a little bit more as we go through this, but that changes as well because there's erosion where the where the soil erodes away and it goes down, or it can, what we call accrete. And that means that soil is coming in and it's building up. And so we want to look at all those different dynamics together and how they kind of relate to each other as everything kind of changes through time. All right. I think I'm going to give it back to you now, Janine. Are we ready to get out to the field, huh?
Yeah, I'm excited. Sarah, you ready?
I am ready. And look at that. We just heard from the field team. They are out there in that part of the reserve we were just talking, and look at that beautiful picture. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight it for you all so that you can see that bigger. And if you are having trouble seeing the slides and the pictures, we have a little bit of feedback on the field cam. There we go. There's actually a gray bar if you're on a computer in between those two, and you can adjust the size so that you can have a bigger image of the field cam or a bigger image of the slide. If you're on a tablet, unfortunately, that feature does not apply. Okay, I think we're ready to proceed.
All right, can you hear us and see our video okay?
Sounds great. It's beautiful out there. What's the temperature?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, we lost them.
Right.
We lost you, Morgan. Can you turn your video back on?
Yes, I don't know what's going on. Apologies.
There it is.
Thanks for bearing with our technical learning curve here. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for our second EDscursion. We are at the Science at the Surface. We are joined today by our research team and some of my fellow educators out in the field, streaming live to you, to your homes. And we are so excited to do this. It's a beautiful day and we are going to learn a ton. So my name is Morgan. I'm on the education team here at Rookery Bay, and I'm going to introduce some of our field team here today. Let's do a little flipperoo.
Hi, my name is Dita. I'm part of the education department.
Good morning. I'm Jill Schmidt. I'm part of the research team here at the Reserve.
All right, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Britta. I'm the research coordinator here at Rookery Bay.
Awesome. It's so great to have you guys out with us today as our special guests. And Britta, I want to know, where are we today? What are we going to be focusing on? Can you give us a little bit more background?
Sure, Morgan. Well, Jeff gave everyone a really nice bird's eye view of the site that we're currently standing in. We're here in a gorgeous coastal scrub habitat. This is a pyrogenic habitat, which means that it naturally burns at periodic intervals. Part of the resource management team at Rookery Bay will actually come out and do prescribed burns. So I don't know if your camera's able to see across the road, but the resource management team just completed a prescribed burn over on that side. In the area that we're standing in today, this site got burned about 3 years ago. So this is the new growth that's been happening over the past 3 years. The landscape here is dominated by a beautiful slash pine. And then here on the ground, we've got cabbage palm that's growing up, small oaks, and love vine, that's a native vine here. I'm sorry? Saw palmetto. And this is really critical habitat for important species such as gopher tortoise, and you can hear the birds in the background that use this habitat as well. Jeff was talking to the audience about how we are looking at how small changes in our sea level rise affects the vegetation community. And so I'd like to show you one of the ways that we measure changes that happen on our landscape. All right, we'll come over here. Jill's going to conduct the measurement for us.
Awesome.
Jeff introduced to the audience surface elevation tables, or SETs. And so I'm going to point out some of the components of the SET that Jeff talked through with people. So if you see that, and I should probably say, the reason why Jill is on an elevated platform and why you're not going to see me come up really close to this is that we keep a very strict perimeter around the SET. The purpose is to measure millimeter level changes in the elevation, the ground height. And if I step on this, I'm going to affect the elevation. And so we want to keep a really wide berth and not step on the habitat that we're going to be measuring. Jill, actually, you're in the perfect position to point the, So Jill's touching the steel rod. We used a really heavy, I forget the, drill hammer to push that steel rod all the way down into bedrock. So that's not going anywhere permanently. And that's all that we have that stays into the ground forever. When we want to do our measurement, Jill comes and she attaches what we call an arm onto that steel rod. Thank you, Jill. Jill is very carefully making sure that the arm is always level. So she's got a level there and she makes sure that the orientation is correct. So every time that we come out, we're going to make sure that the arm is completely level. And then you can see that she has 9 fiberglass pins here. They're labeled 1 through 9 so that we always put the same pin in the same location. And it's a little hard because, again, we can't step too closely to really see how she's very precisely putting those pins on the ground. A lot of ecologists will say you want to kiss the surface, a light little kiss to the ground. So she's making sure that her pins are just lightly touching the ground, but not actually penetrating it. You see? And then she'll use these clips to make sure that when she has those pins nicely kissing the ground, then it's Valentine's Day. It makes sense. Then
We're conscious of our holidays here at Rookery Bay.
Yeah. And And then she's going to make sure that those clips are keeping those pins in place for when she takes her measurements.
Now, Britta, if Jill were to come out here on a normal day, like we're experiencing now, does she only take the measurement from this direction?
No, that's a great question. So we've got 9 pins, and you see one of the 4 orientations that Jill is going to measure. So the way that the arm is designed is that it has these preset preset locations. So she'll actually spin the arm 360 degrees around the rod.
Awesome.
And we know exactly which orientation we're going to be looking at. And so Jill's going to take a measurement now from the top of the bar to the top of the pin, and she'll relay her orientation and the pin number and the measurement to Dita, who's going to record the information for us.
And you can also see just the variation on how tall these pins are. Jeff was mentioning how, small changes in elevation, and you can see from these pins, it looks like we're on flat ground, but you can see just how much of a change there is right here in this one spot.
Centimeters of change.
Millimeters. So Dita, I have 1, 3, 4 for number 1.
Okay.
Number 2 is 1, 3, 5.
Okay.
Number 3 is 1, 4, 5.
Okay.
Number 4 is 154.
Okay.
Number 5 is 153.
Okay.
Number 6 is 170.
Okay.
Number 7 is 174.
Okay.
Number 8 is 173.
Okay.
And number 9 is 168.
Right.
Very precise. Thank you, Jill.
We'll actually, on a normal, we will, after the video here, Dita's going to read those numbers back to Jill, and we'll do a confirmation to make sure that those numbers have been recorded accurately. And then they get transcribed into an online database. And we really describe these type of measurements as a multi-decadal observation system, even going up to 100 years. We don't learn that much about what's happening in the system within a year or even 2 or 3 years. It takes about 10 years to really understand what kind of changes are happening to this environment, because it's happening at a very, very small scale, and there's a lot of variability involved. So in order to really get a good sense of the trend of change, it'll be about 10 years.
Wow.
Taking measurements. Yeah.
Long-term project. That's great.
Exactly.
And that's awesome. And you said you use the veg plots as well to monitor that change in vegetation as well.
Yeah, so this particular location here is looking at the changing elevation. And so the ways that elevation could change, the bedrock could move. There could be changes in below ground water table. There could be some debris that's falling in. So if you scan over here, Morgan, you'll see that there's some downed woody debris here. So that's obviously adding to the elevation here.
Definitely.
And as leaves and litter fall to the ground, organic litter, then that changes your elevation rates too. And the amount of sediment that moves into a system changes it. So all those type of biological factors and physical factors will change the elevation. At the same time, as you mentioned, we've got locations out here where we look at all of the vegetation that's in a 100 square meter plot. We do that 3 times. So we will go out every year, and as Jeff said, we will measure all of the different species that are here. We'll take some of their measurements, like how tall they are, and then population dominance to really get a sense of the community type that we have.
Awesome. And so you told us in the beginning that we're in this coastal scrub habitat. Is there a way that our viewers can get kind of a feel for a place like this if they're local?
Oh yeah, that's exactly what we encourage you to do. this particular experimental site, we ask that visitors stay away from so that we can really take these very precise measurements. But Morgan, if you and I can swing around, I think that you'll be able to get a picture of the Briggs Boardwalk. We've got some visitors out there right now. It's a gorgeous boardwalk, and there are volunteers from the Conservancy of Southwest Florida who are wonderful naturalist guides. They can, I think they're there on the weekends to help visitors identify the plants and animals that are out there. And it's a great walk through this coastal scrub habitat and out to the wetland area.
Beautiful. And now you can use your newfound knowledge of Sentinel sites and surface elevation tables and bring your families and get a nice bird's eye view of this beautiful habitat. That's awesome.
And I just wanted to mention, this is one of 4 locations that we measure using this technique. We also have a mangrove site, a brackish marsh site, and a salt marsh site. And we will be expanding this program as we go.
Awesome. All right, well, I believe we have some measuring to do here in the field, so I will let Britta say adios. Thank you, Britta, for your expertise.
Bye, everyone.
All right, and we'll say goodbye from Dita. Thank you for collecting data, Dita. That's the important part. And Jill, our master on the apparatus this morning.
So balanced.
Yes. And we greatly appreciate you tuning in for our field portion. This was so much fun, but we have work to do. So we're going to tune back to our back end team to wrap it up for us. So thank you all.
Thank you, Morgan. Okay, here we are back on the slides. So I'll go ahead and advance whenever you're ready.
All right, go ahead, Sarah. We'll go to the next slide. And so we're going to reiterate a little bit what was going on out there as the team was walking you through what they were doing. Now you can see here the arm as, is that Britta? I'm not sure who that is laying on the, on the platform, but you can see the arm there. And if you look over to the right, you can see that diagram that we have. Now, here is kind of a view that shows you what's going on under the surface of the ground, right? And as Britta mentioned, the rod, these are steel rods that we screw together, and like she said, we take a jackhammer and we pound those into the ground, right? And we pound it down till it goes to refusal in the bedrock. And the reason we do that is we don't want that rod, so here, if I've got a pin right here in front of me. So we don't want that rod to move up and down at all. If anything moves, the surface of the ground is going to move some, all right? And as she was saying, you know, with a leaf litter and you know, the wind blowing in soil, or even erosion from rain or storms might affect the surface changing there. And that's what those pins, as she was saying, when Jill was putting it down there to just kiss the very surface of the ground, all right, every time they go out there and they make those measurements, they may be moving differently, all right, depending on whether it's eroding there or whether it's accreting and building up some. One of the things that we can tell you is that the more biodiverse an area is, the healthier it is. And a lot of times with some habitat types, especially like mangroves, the healthier they are and the more detritus, the more leaf litter they're dropping, they're actually building up elevation, right, to keep up with sea level rise, things like mangroves. Now, just think about the fact that under the ground, you've got the water table, right, where water is coming up underneath those plants, all right, in the water table beneath them. And as sea level rise comes up, that saltier water that's not too far away in that wetland, and as it comes up closer to the surface, if it gets too close to things like the roots of pine trees and even the saw palmettos, it can cause those plants to die, that saltier water, all right? So if that happens, then we'll also see change in those plants that are within that plot that Britta was talking about, that measured plot where they have identified every plant within there, all right? And I think we can go to the next slide. All right, now this is going to tie everything together. All right, so just keep in mind that, you know, we have a national highway system all throughout the United States. And that national highway system they've surveyed the elevations of those roads, and they put in rods just like we did for our arm for our surface elevation table, right? That rod, that deep rod, they will put those rods in the ground right near the road or in between the road and the median. And then they use all this satellite technology, measuring from the satellites and everything to actually figure out what the elevation is, how far above, what is the surface of the earth elevation there. And they measure it to the very tip of that metal rod, right on the tip. Okay, they know what that elevation is. And when that's in the ground, it's called a monument. So what we do is we survey from those monuments, and we'll take that elevation and pull it through surveying across the surface of the earth out to that rod where the arm is. Now, as you can see here, you can see the set table there on the left-hand side, right? And then as you move over, you can see there's the sea level, all right, and the tide station, which is also surveyed in. All right, let's talk about, okay. You can see the tide station, which is surveyed in, right? And so all of those things have a common elevation so that we can tell what's going on at the set as it elevation wise compares to the elevation of the sea, of the ocean, which the tide station is recording, so that we know everything that's going on and how those changes there in the ocean, relate to the changes in the surface of the earth, which relate to the changes in the habitats as they move, and we capture those trends of movement over time. All right, so that's pretty cool that we can see all of that there. And I think are we ready to switch over to the habitat map? All right, so this is our habitat map that we talked about earlier, and Sarah's going to click on this and bring it up online for us. Holy moly, look at that. I told you it was detailed, guys. That is pretty amazing. That is a lot of work, y'all. A lot of work to make a map like this. And there are scores of different habitat type categories that pertain to each little different vegetative habitat community, okay? And now this is from a little over 10 years ago. And as Britta was saying, we wait at least on a decadal scale to look at change and try to capture those trends, right? And we're going to be very soon making new habitat maps the same exact way that we made the old ones, right? This one that you see here now. And we're going to actually be able to look at and compare those two maps and see change, how those habitats have moved. Now, the surface elevation tables and the plots, the vegetation plots, will give us an even higher resolution, more detailed, accurate view of what's going on the ground as it relates to what we see when we redo these maps and look at that. Now, I think Sarah's going to move into the spot. Yeah, look at that. If we go, I think you can see the little area over there, a little bit to your right, Sarah. Oh, snap. Something went wrong.
Sorry about that. I think I zoomed in too close.
Yeah, maybe it got a little, or just a little too fast or something.
There's so much data here that it does take a while to load.
I know. That's what I was saying. It might have been too little.
Layers. Okay, great.
There you go. Okay, but anyway.
Open the legend.
So as we said earlier, it was looking at these habitat maps that kind of gave us the guidance that we needed to know, okay, where do we see different specific kinds of habitat types close to each other, right? What we were looking for was where does there exist an upland area that has a pretty good slope, fairly close down to an area that's a wetland area. Because we know that as sea level rise comes up and things start moving and changing, well, they've already been moving and changing for well, forever. Change, that movement and changing has always happened. But now we're actually going to be recording it so that we know really what's going on. But looking at these maps told us where we can see an upland close to a wetland area, like right there where the field crew was. And what that does is that told us, okay, we're more likely to see change there first. So this is where we're going to want to kind of concentrate our efforts and put all this infrastructure for the Sentinel site infrastructure, the rods in, and set up the sets and put the vegetation plots in place and all of that kind of stuff, right? So what does this mean for our community? Okay, because we don't just do this willy-nilly, for the heck of it, right? For the science of it. Science is supposed to be done to help us understand the world around us so that we can understand how what's going on in the world around us, those natural processes that are occurring, how does that affect us? Does it affect us in a good way, or are things changing in a way that it might have detrimental effects to our communities, right? And looking at the natural world is that lens through which we can see change and then interpret how that's affecting our built infrastructure, our roads, our homes, everything that we do to build and have our communities. And so that really helps us to tell a story about what's going on. So if we see things changing in the natural world that is decreasing the biodiversity and decreasing its resilience. This is a really hot word right now these days, is the resilience. So when our natural habitats are doing better and they're healthier and more biodiverse, that means they are more resilient. And that means they're there to support us, to keep our water clean, to keep our air clean, also to protect us. The wetlands are there to help stop storm surge and wind. Things, when we have hurricanes, those habitat types, especially down there in the 10,000 islands with all those mangroves, are there to stop that and to help protect us from those bad storms that could, really, well, we all know we've been through it. So that's the reason that we're looking at this stuff, is to give us an insight to look through that lens and see what's going on so that we know how do we need to react and plan. This is all about planning for the future. How do we react and plan so that we're doing things to protect ourselves from the bad detrimental effects of extreme weather, like hurricanes and stronger hurricanes and flooding and that kind of stuff. And just remember that water quality too, talk about, HABs, harmful algal blooms and red tides and things like that. The healthier the water and the water quality is, the better it is for us. So that's what it means for us in our communities. How am I doing, Sarah?
Thanks so much, Jeff. That was such a thorough explanation of some really complicated stuff. I forgot to mention in the beginning that this presentation is recorded. So if you want to watch it again to gather more of that, or you have friends that didn't have an opportunity to see it, you will be emailed the link to the webpage at the end of the presentation. So that'll be there, as well as the rest of our EDscursion links as well. So we hope you'll join us for future ones, and you'll join us for ones that have already been recorded too. So thank you for that. So I think we're going to go ahead and turn it over to questions. Thank you for entering them into the box. I'm going to turn it over to Janine, and we will proceed. All right, take it away.
All right. Well, if I my internet we're not having the last few minutes. So yeah, so for participating. I even have questions, but I'm gonna to our first and really important one. If our field team is still around and can answer questions, are you there?
We are here, Janine.
Okay, awesome.
Excellent.
Well, I think a really great question that came really was how often do the SETs?
How often do you?
Janine, we're actually not able to hear you. So oh, and she just dropped off. So I'm going to change your view so that you can see all of us at the same time. And
I think I'm still spotlighted, Sarah. You might want to.
you are, yes. I am removing that. Sorry, there's so
You look
many
good,
clips
Jeff.
to do here.
They're tired of looking at my ugly mess.
All right, how's that? Okay, cool.
So I'm back.
I know Janine's internet is like really her connection difficult for us to hear. So I'm going to read the question that you guys were about to answer. So someone from the audience, Amy, asked the question, how often do you measure?
At the beginning, we measure the SETs every 6 months. And then as the monitoring program goes on, probably about 5 years into it, we'll switch to once a year.
Wow, cool. Janine, it looks like she's back, but she's frozen. So I'm going to go ahead and answer the next most highly voted question. And this comes from Jim. It says, you've been measuring this site for 10 years. What has the trend been?
Thanks for that question, Jim. Actually, these are brand new sites. So we installed these rods about 2 years ago. So we're right at the beginning of this particular measurement here at the scrub site. But there have been surface elevation tables that were installed in mangrove locations by the U.S. Geological Survey back in the 90s. And those are the longest measured surface elevation tables in mangrove systems in the world. And so in general, we're finding that the fringe mangrove site is keeping pace almost with sea level rise at about 3 millimeters a year. When we have major hurricanes come and hit the areas, it really depends on the way that the hurricane has interacted with the site. So some sites will have a big loss or big erosion event happen because of a hurricane, and other sites you'll have actually a bunch of marine sediments that will get pushed up and layered on top of the site, and so you'll have a big increase. So the interesting thing about these measurements that we're doing, we really explain changes in small intervals over time, but when you have major episodes like hurricanes, that can have just a huge change in either loss or gain. And again, that's happening over decadal cycles. And that's why we just have to keep measuring for decades.
Thanks, Britta. I want to add one other combination of someone else's question, and that is relating to the hurricane information that you just shared. It says, did Hurricane Irma surge to reach the point that you're at today and change anything measurably?
Hurricane Irma's storm surge was measured at our field station at about 2 feet above the ground. I will have to, I think, talk with Jill and look at our survey information. I'm not sure if where we are standing right now is 2 feet higher than where our field station is. I think it possibly might be, so maybe the storm surge didn't make it all the way up to inundate the coastal scrub.
This is higher than that.
Yeah, well, okay, several feet.
At least.
Jill, could you repeat that for our audience?
The site we're sitting at now is probably 5 to 10 feet higher than where our field station's located.
Wow.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. Every inch counts in South Florida. Okay, Janine, it looks like you are back. So I've clicked the questions I've answered. If you want to hop in, and I'll jump in if you disappear.
Yeah, I think so one of our questions is, are there large changes during rainy season?
Ooh, I like that question a lot. It depends on the site. And also the ability for that water table to shift underneath the ground. So in some of our locations, especially the salt marsh and brackish marsh, the changes to in rainy season will really affect the water underneath the soil. And you can imagine that your soil has all that we call interstitial spaces, and the water can really get in there and essentially the ground kind of elevates up.
Swells.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like filling a sponge with water.
Yeah. So that's a great question. It does have a difference.
Wow. Who would have thought?
And do all of the NERS have this program? So is this a nationwide effort?
Yeah, this is a nationwide effort. All 29 reserves have Sentinel sites, and each Sentinel site is going to look different, answer some different questions, but some of the really basic core elements, such as surface elevation tables and vegetation, are included in every NERS Sentinel site location.
And can I add something real quick to
Would
that?
any of those other, oh, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just going to say, so I'm glad you asked that question about all of the reserves around the country. And when I was speaking earlier about how we actually take those elevations from our road systems, that is an interconnecting thing that connects all of the different reserves together. So we have a common geodetic elevation reference point related to our roads everywhere. And so that's kind of what connects us together. So that means that we can actually compare some of our data from what the changes that are happening that the field crew is telling you about. Cool stuff.
Very cool. And I kind of have two other questions that were posed that I'll mesh together. Since this is national, are there any other similar sites like ours? Is our Florida landscape unique? And then in that Florida landscape, do you ever see rattlesnakes out there at the site you're at?
Well, okay, I'm gonna take that backwards just because that's a fun answer. I will say that we have a really wonderful member of our team who knows the landscape so well, and also apparently is an incredible jumper. So when we were scouting the locations to figure out which sites we wanted to put on, thank goodness he was the head of our line as we were going through some really dense vegetation. And I saw him jump in this beautiful, graceful jump and move out of the way of a rattlesnake pretty fast. So yeah, they're out here. That was so interesting that I have to remember the other. Oh, the uniqueness of this landscape. Well, each reserve is placed in a specific location across the United States to really represent a particular ecosystem or habitat type. And there are parallels and similarities. And so our sister reserves in Florida include Apalachicola, which is in the Panhandle, and GTM Reserve, which is near St. Augustine. And we have down here in South Florida, very established mangrove habitat, mature mangrove habitat. So does our sister reserve in Puerto Rico. And what we've been finding is that as climates are changing, mangroves are actually moving northward. Their latitude is changing. And so we've got a pretty new mangrove monitoring group as we look at mangroves that are moving into the reserves, our sister reserves, Apalachicola, GTM, and other reserves across the Gulf of Mexico. So while their emergent mangroves are looking different than our mature mangrove forests, that's going to change over the next 10 years, and those emergent mangroves are going to become more mature. Yeah, so we're getting more similar in some ways.
Well, thank you, field crew and Jeff, for joining the education team on our EDscursion. Now, these programs are offered every other Friday. So next Friday, you can do your own thing, but the Friday after, we hope you'll join us again at 9 a.m. when we explore the field by finding fish. We'll actually be going out on a boat, pulling a trawl net. And the cool part about this is, even though we would love to be in person, we would love to be in the office, we would love to have our Environmental Learning Center open, we are able to take you guys into secret places in the reserve that you wouldn't be able to go otherwise. So we're trying to find a silver lining of the remote situation. And it's been really fun because we can share some really special places with you all from the comfort of your home. So that being said, as soon as I hit end here in about 10 seconds, you are going to see a survey pop up on your screen. We really hope you'll take 10 seconds to fill that out because we want to know where you're located. Something interesting that has happened in our virtual shift during this pandemic is we are reaching audiences around the world. Lots of time zones, lots of geography. So we're so curious where you're located and also how old are you? These kinds of programs would have been done possibly for school groups in the past, but we look at it as an opportunity to teach K to Gray. So tell us about yourself and tell us how we can do better because like I said, we're doing these every 2 weeks and we want to make them the best that they can be. So stay tuned for upcoming programs and thank you so much for joining us today. We're signing off.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us in the field. Huge thank you to our research team and our stewardship coordinator, Jeff. We so appreciate your expertise, but we're going to clean up. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.